technology, engineering, and math will be available for families to check out with activities everyone can do together. There is a wildly popular program called Teen Book Box. Each box in this free teen subscription program contains a hand-picked reading recommendation based on the teen's preferences. The box also includes treats and swag. Teens can register each month for another exciting box to be picked up at the Stanislaus County Library location of their choice.
So at the senior end of the spectrum, some county residents are homebound and do not have the ability to get to a library. Volunteers on the home delivery program check out books on the customer's wish list to deliver and pick up later. With the recent COVID situation, the program became even more crucial to our community. Veterans have access to the Veterans Resource Center. Military personnel, veterans, and their families can find information regarding benefits, housing, education, employment, and health care at this center. Book clubs can borrow multiple copies of books, often with a large print and CD edition available, to read and discuss together without having the expense of buying them all. This is called Book Club in a Box, and the kits include discussion questions for the participants. Some of our libraries provide passport application services, and we have people who come from the Bay Area here because they can get an appointment here. Customers can get face-to-face assistance from a knowledgeable person by appointment rather than waiting on the phone forever or online. Overall, the library's materials collection is extensive, meeting the wide variety of diverse interests in our community, from medical information, learning new skills, to enriching our curious minds. All these examples, materials, programs, services, indicate that our library system truly serves to create lifelong learners in Stanislaus County. In closing, you can see why our Stanislaus Library Foundation is excited about everything our system has to offer and eager to support it any way that we can. We want to spread the word and are happy to be here today to do exactly that as you prepare to proclaim National Library Week. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you guys both very much. We so much appreciate all the work that you do, and it's crucial work, what you do. And I know you get big salaries for doing this. No, I mean, I know you get nothing for doing this. And we very much appreciate all the work you do. And we do have coming up here, like you said, I think on April 5th, we're going to have a presentation there, and when it's a library, for Library Week. So thank you guys for all you do. Very much needed.
Thank you.
We'll see you then. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I just?
Sure.
One other thing is that it's very difficult for you to come up in 3 or 4 or 5 minutes and talk about all the things the library does. And I would just, for the listening public and for those of you who are standing out here, go to your library and ask what services are provided, because there are so many audio books, there's the 3D printers, there's the story time, the things that we think, but there's so much more. You want to learn another language? There's the ability to do it. So please go and see your librarian, your local librarian. There are so many libraries out there, and find out what it is that the library can offer other than what you heard today, because it's so expansive we can't talk about all of it. And it's free.
Thank you. Thanks, Vito. Thank you guys very much. Okay, last one I have, speaker card is Joni Griep. Joni. Joni, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm well, thank you. I am going to read to you guys a statement from my brother-in-law, who is an ex-Californian. So I'll just read this now. My wife and I were born and raised here in Modesto, and our plan was to raise our children here and retire here. We love our hometown. When COVID hit and schools and sports were shut down for our 4 kids, we began to reconsider our plans for our time in California. We had friends in other states that weren't experiencing the same response to COVID. Their kids were still in schools. Their sports and extracurricular activities were still in effect. There may have been periods of time where things were shut down, but it was very short-lived. So we began our search for a new state to call home. Through God's providence, we landed in Tennessee. we have experienced freedom of choice when it comes to wearing a mask or being vaccinated. Our kids have never had to wear a mask in school, and they certainly aren't shamed into wearing one correctly. One of the most vivid memories that will encapsulate the differences between what we experienced in California versus what we have experienced in Tennessee took place at a high school basketball game. We sat in a packed gym at the kids' high school. The basketball team had reached a state playoff game, and the excitement in town was unbelievable. Strangers sat elbow to elbow. Some chose to wear masks, some didn't. Meanwhile, at the same time, here in Modesto, our nephew, my son, was not only being forced to wear a mask, but also shamed and punished if the mask wasn't worn properly. Confusion was added by the fact that not all teachers enforced the mandate to the same degree. Additionally, my son's good friend had a teacher use duct tape to adhere a mask to his face because the teacher didn't agree with how the mask was being worn. Since we have settled into Tennessee and given our children the opportunity to live freely, we've seen each of them blossom. The time off from in-person learning and extracurricular activities in California had a profound impact on their mental well-being. We wouldn't sit idly by and let others make poor choices for them. Modesto will always hold a special place in our hearts, so many memories and so many wonderful people. But when forced to choose between following an ever-shifting set of mandates, do as I say, not as I do policies, and the well-being of our family, the choice was easy. We will choose family every time and sink our roots deep where we are given the freedom to raise our children as we see fit. That's the words of my brother-in-law. Let me shift gears to Senate Bill 871. The Keep Schools Open and Safe Act. How many children in our county, how many families will be affected if this passes? In our county, only 14% of 5 to 11-year-olds are fully vaccinated against COVID. What will happen to the remaining 86%? 40% of 12 to 15-year-olds are vaccinated in our county, and 52% of 16 to 17-year-olds are fully vaccinated. There is no data that I could find for our youngest children in our county, and I'm assuming that's because there's still no emergency use authorization for their age group. In fact, in the most recent clinical trial for under 5 years of age, Pfizer couldn't prove a clear benefit, and the efficacy rate was abysmal. So they are now in a second clinical trial in another attempt to obtain an EUA for our youngest babies. And yet our babies are included in Senate Bill 871. I cannot do this alone. I recently told my assemblyman, Heath Flora, that as a mom, I feel hopeless. I don't have a union to fight for me. Our kids don't have a union to fight for them. It's up to me, and that's overwhelming. So please help. Please speak out against this bill for our kids in our community. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Joni. Thank you very much, and I believe we were going to have an item on our agenda next week dealing with that Bill 871. Thank you very much. So that's all the speaker cards that I have, besides a specific item coming up on the agenda. I'm sorry.
Hi.
It'd be nice if I looked up, huh?
Sorry, I have a yellow card, but I never
No, that's
turned it
okay.
in. I kind of want to elaborate on that. I'm going to send you guys actually a list of some bad bills that are in legislation. I know there are, I think almost 3,000. There are two that are very specific to me, AB 1993, which is said to be heard in the Labor Committee tomorrow, and SB 871. Those are life-changing, guys. Like, if we give over, and I know that these are not directly on you, but I would just invite you guys to reach out however you feel in opposition, maybe as a board. Like this 1993, if we allow, which is, for people that don't know, is the mandate for everybody to be vaccinated, even independent contractors. You have to require it for your employees. It's everybody in California, period. And then the SB 871, not only is it the K through 12 mandate, but it will remove any personal belief exemption, which will also, they will never have to go through legislation to add another vaccine to the children's school schedule ever again. So next year it could be the flu, and after that it can be smallpox, and then it could be anthrax, and it could be whatever, you know, the California government decides that our children need. So I am getting everything together. I'm going to send you guys over some information. I would strongly encourage you to look them over, not only as individuals, but as board members. Like, we are fighting. They are coming for our kids really hard, and we are fighting, and we know you guys are awesome, and we appreciate you guys. So just wanted to share that. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. So, sorry, we had...
Sorry, Megan Short.
Perfect. Thanks, Megan. Come on down. Good morning. How are you?
Very good. Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, and thank you again for the opportunity to come before you. I wanted to share a quote with you I just came across the other day that really jumped out at me by Daniel Webster. Timothy Benefield, by the way, I should have said that up front. One of our early statesmen. He said, "Hold on, my friends, to the Constitution and to the Republic for which it stands. Miracles do not cluster, and what has happened once in 6,000 years may not happen again. Hold on to the Constitution, for if the American Constitution should fail, there will be anarchy throughout the world." And this was said a couple hundred years ago, and I believe that's even more true now than it was then. And I just believe we have a supermajority in our state here that doesn't have much respect for the Constitution, and they have a list of bills, a couple of which were just mentioned, that are just right on the verge of being an absolute police state. I'm afraid so many people don't know about it. I'm specifically coming to you today and knowing that you're not voting on them, but I want to ask you to do a couple of things. First of all, if you would consider, as a county, making some official opposition statements against some of these bills. And it is insane that there's 3,000 on deck, but of them, there's quite a few, at least 16, that are just horrific. And also, I would like to urge you, I mean, I know this is a nonpartisan board. I don't know all of your parties, and I think that's a good thing. You guys have been great here and always respectful and willing to listen. But if you do know people, if some of you have connections with some of these people, I don't think, well, I believe there's a number of the supermajority that are not comfortable with these things, but it's uncomfortable sometimes for them to stand out within their own party and take a stand against some of these things. So if you know them, let them know how much support there is out here, perhaps support from you. I think an official statement from the board would be helpful. You've already heard, of course, about 1993, which is one of the worst, being heard tomorrow, requiring every single employee in California to be vaccinated. And, of course, 871, requiring all students to be vaccinated for COVID. Just in the face of all the science, of all the negative reactions, the science that the kids are at almost zero risk. They're at more risk of dying in a car wreck on the way to school than they are of having any serious impact from COVID. And a few other ones, I won't try to give you them all just for sake of time, but a few others that are pretty bad. There was one here, SB 1464, that would require all law enforcement officers basically become the enforcers for the health care or health officials. It forces them to enforce public health orders. When all this first came down a couple years ago, our church closed for a brief time, just trying to see what was going on, trying to be responsible. But we realized within 6 to 8 weeks, there was a very specific group of people affected by it, and we took precautions for them, but that the bulk of us were not at any serious risk. And so we went back to meeting. And at the time, we were, as we talked with law enforcement officials in the area, they said, we're not here to harass you or cause problems. But this bill would change all that. They would be forced to enforce these orders or lose their funding. And so, the health board does not need its own law enforcement agency and wing carrying out these unelected officials' orders, which oftentimes are very politically motivated. There's also one here that would require or removes SB 960, the provision that requires peace officers to either be a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident who is eligible and has applied for citizenship. And to me, that's just insane, absolutely insane. And if we don't take a stand for this kind of stuff, then the doors are open up for unintended, maybe intended consequences, but unintended consequences as well. that would have far-reaching effects. I see another one, that SB 1100, that authorizes the removal of willful interrupters from public meetings. Now, you folks have been great, but not every board has been that way. I've heard you listen to some pretty fired up people who are upset with you, and you've handled it very graciously. But a lot of boards won't put up, and city councils and school board meetings won't put up with that kind of stuff at all. And it gives them the authorization to start having people removed. And I'm sure that there's a great potential for abuse there. I'll give you one more and then I will be done. But SB 906, parents must report legally owned firearms to their children's school and the location where they are stored. Now, you want to talk about no respect for the Constitution, this is a big one. So there's a lot more, but those are just a few. And I would encourage you, if you're looking for a place that's got all this information and gather, I'm not a founding member or anything of Take a Stand Stanislaus. You've met Corinne several times, but they've done tremendous work on organizing this stuff. And if you would connect with them or whatever other options you have, but please help us take a stand against these anti-constitutional bills that are being heard right now up in Sacramento. Thank you.
Thanks, Timothy. Thank you very much. Okay, that is it with the speaker cards. And anybody else like to speak before we move on? Okay, we're going to move on now to our consent calendar. We do have one speaker card on item B10 on our consent calendar. Anybody on the board have any items you want to pull from consent? Okay, seeing none, let's go, if we could, let's just go to Catherine, if you want to come up, and we'll talk about B10 real quick, and then I've got something I need to do with B3. Too. Okay. Catherine, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Good. How are you?
Good. Thank you.
So first of all, the only reason I'm here today is because I sent a request to the county to see the consultant's report for the substation, but I didn't receive it. But I did get an email at 8:40 today, but that was not in time enough to stop me from coming down because, you know, it takes a while to get from Salida to here. And the email doesn't contain the consultant's report, so I didn't get the answer anyways yet that I wanted in time before this meeting. So having lived in Salida for 30 years, I remember when our sheriff's substation was in a modular building in downtown Salida and then moved into the remodeled Bank of the West building in 2003, which is now La Familia Market. The substation was closed during the recession. A main reason cited was the high cost of rent. If I recall correctly, it was $10,000 a month. At the August 2021 Salida MAC meeting, Sheriff Dirksey mentioned the two key options for a substation, the first being the 6,000 square feet of unused space in the Salida Library building. The remodel of that old Bruner's building was $6.3 million back in 2003. Sheriff Dirksey stated that the other site, the Salida Fire Department Station 12, does not have the square footage needs to occupy further in the future. Sheriff Dirksey stated that the county is in the process of hiring a contractor through GSA to do a site assessment on both facilities. He stated, and I quote, "We have to get that estimate before we have an honest conversation." Quite frankly, I don't have much of an opinion on where the substation was located until I received an email on March 15th, 2022 that reported an arrest for prostitution on March 13th, 2022 in the 4900 block of Sisk Road, which is the site of two hotels. Further online searching turned up a bust by Turlock PD of a prostitution ring at the same address in February of 2021. I asked a sheriff department employee which hotel had sex trafficking, and the reply was all of them. The hotel closest to the library is a 430-foot walk from my house, so I have no words for how horrifying what is going on just feet from my neighborhood. There's a small substation already built in the Salida Library, which even has signage, but has never been staffed. Perhaps if it was staffed, that could deter human trafficking and prostitution at these two hotels. Both Sheriff Dirksey and Chief Pat Burns stated at Salida MAC at two different times that the lease for the property would be for 99 years, yet this agenda item states only a 2-year lease with a further option of 2 years. This 2 to 4 year lease was never mentioned at Salida Mac, nor was there any presentation given by the General Services Agency comparing the two sites. Where is the contractor's report that Sheriff Dirksey mentioned? It's not attached in the board item. The Salida community deserves to know all aspects of why a leased site is being chosen over a large site already owned by the county. Salida already has a history of having substations closed due to a lease, so we should be able to have the answers to all of our questions before this item is passed today. The MAC should not be bypassed. This item should be pulled and presentation given to Salida MAC by GSA and the sheriff on why this site was chosen and explain the disparities of the lease terms. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Catherine. Is there anybody else, and I failed to ask, anybody else in the audience want to pull any of the consent items? Okay, seeing none, that's great. Okay, we'll come back to the board here. And with regard to this item B10, just a little bit of, this is just, we're opening it up on April 8th, I think is the day that we're going to get open out there. And this is just temporary to get us open and to get us a spot out there that we're visible. And nothing has been decided with regard to permanence and everything like that. So we're going to get there, and everybody will be a part of that conversation. Catherine, we'll make sure everybody is involved in that decision-making process. This is just temporary, 2 years, just to get us going as we're going through the process and figuring this out, where the permanent location will be and what the building will look like and all that stuff, and the lease, what that will look like. So I know staff worked hard to get this together so we could just get this thing open at kind of a lot of pressure from the board to make this happen. So, because the main thing is just to get a presence out there in Salida right now. And so that's going to happen on April 8th. And all these details of the permanent location and what the structure will look like, everybody will be involved in that when that happens. So.
If I could also add, because I know that we had discussed at our retreat about a bigger vision for what might be housed out there, not just the sheriff's substation, but also potentially CSA or BHRS, or everything is on the table essentially. And so we need to work through those issues too, as far as how much space we might need, where's a good location, not just for the substation, but again, to provide services for the community, assuming we can get that all together.
Right, so perfect. So good questions, Catherine. We're going to get all that stuff. That details of that will come forward, but for now, it's just, we're just trying to get something open out there right away. So, okay. Seeing none other with regard to our consent calendar, okay, I'm going to need to step away. Let's do a motion first for all items on the consent calendar except item B3, which I have a conflict on. Let's start with that.
Motion to approve all items except for item B3.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes unanimously. Okay, for item B3, I have a conflict. This is a client of mine in my practice, and I'm going to step away and let Chance do this one, and then I will come back.
Okay, we're going to hear item B3, which is the approval of the Second Amendment to the agreement between the County of Stanislaus and Pegasus Risk Management for Voters' Compensation Third-Party Administrative Services. So I'll go ahead and open it up to the board for any comment.
So I will go ahead and move that motion and then recognize that Supervisor Withrow has left the dais.
Second. But should we open up for public comment as well?
You can ask if you want to.
Okay. Open up to the public if anyone has any comment on item B3. Okay. Seeing none, we'll return to the board.
Motion and a second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Motion carries.
All right. Should I go get the chair?
Okay, thanks, Chance. All right.
Chair in the making.
That's right. Okay. We will move on now to our first discussion item, item 7.1, approval to introduce and waive the first reading on an ordinance related to solid waste and food recovery requirements. Good morning, Rob. How are you?
I'm good. Yourself?
I'm good, thank you.
Well, we have our solid waste manager, Will Richards, with us today to go over the requested code changes. And assisting him is Caitlin Bell Espinoza, also from our Solid Waste Division. And we have our consultants that worked on the ordinance change, HF and H, in the audience as well.
Rob, one minute. We're not hearing you well. Can you pull it closer?
Oh, that's all I had.
You're tall. You may have to lean down.
Okay. So I'm going to hand it over to Will.
Okay, perfect. Will, good morning.
Good morning, Chairman Withrow, members of the board, CEO Hayes, and County Council Bowes. I'm Will Richards, the Solid Waste Program Manager for Stanislaus County, and I'm joined here today by Caitlin Bell Espinoza, who is a Staff Services Analyst with our division. I'm here today to introduce to you the first reading of an ordinance to comply with the requirements of Senate Bill 1383, which we've been to before a handful of times. As you know, Senate Bill 1383 was signed into law by Governor Brown in 2016 in efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by diverting organic materials away from landfills. The bill established requirements that the county and other local jurisdictions implement a compliant waste collection program, increase edible food recovery, procure recycled materials, and adopt an enforceable ordinance to administer these new regulations. The ordinance presented to you today will establish the compliant requirements for food recovery, waste collection, and contamination, as well as give the county authority to enforce these regulations. The ordinance covers a wide scope of waste regulations and codifies some existing services like bulky item collection. I will provide a brief overview of the ordinance and thoroughly discuss the major changes. The largest change in the SB 1383 regulations is implementing a compliant waste collection system. The system was implemented in January and March of this year in the various garbage franchise collection areas. The new ordinance formalizes the new services as required by the regulations. Both residents and businesses who are subject to SB 1383 regulations must source separate their waste in accordance with these regulations and the system provided by their respective franchise hauler. The new ordinance will enable the county to cite willful violators for contaminating their waste stream or refusing to subscribe to services where is required through a series of escalating fines. The ordinance will grant the department the authority to issue de minimis and physical space waivers to eligible commercial customers. The county has already applied for and received a low population waiver for 9 census tracts that meet the eligibility requirements. De minimis waivers allow for commercial generators who do not produce amounts greater than 10 or 20 gallons per week of organic or recyclable materials to be exempt from needing a green or blue cart. Physical space waivers allow for commercial generators who do not have the physical space on their property for the additional bins to be exempt from needing a green cart. Very few businesses will meet the requirements for a physical space waiver. Commercial food generators must begin donating edible food to food recovery organizations that would otherwise be thrown out. Food generators must enter an agreement with food recovery organizations and keep records of the amount of food they donate throughout the year. Also, the franchise haulers must keep records on diverted tonnages, contamination monitoring, customer participation, and other items. One of the unfortunate realities of the new regulations is the requirement to enforce on residents and businesses who do not comply with the new waste collection services. The franchise haulers will tag carts of waste generators when there is contamination with information on what is and is not acceptable in their carts. Repeat contaminators and generators who refuse to subscribe to appropriate service will be referred to the county and can face a series of escalating fines ranging from $50 to $500 depending on the number of violations and the severity of the issue. This fine structure is applicable for both residential and commercial customers. In efforts to educate generators who may be confused about sorting their waste, the franchise haulers will provide 2 courtesy pickups of contaminated carts and tag them with educational information until October 2022. Beginning October 1st, 2022, only 1 courtesy pickup of contaminated carts will be provided to generators. After that, the cart will be tagged and they will have to resolve the contamination issues on their own. Generators who willfully contaminate and remain uncompliant with the regulations may be referred to the department for immediate enforcement. Violations of requirements other than contamination are required to be penalized beginning January 1, 2024. But county staff will continue an education-first approach with generators who may incidentally contaminate their carts. We understand this is a very confusing process and a very drastic change to our program here, so we want to give people some time to learn and time to adjust for some of those minor issues. In regards to food recovery requirements, in efforts to reduce food waste and increase food donation, commercial food generators must enter into agreements with food recovery organizations to donate their edible food that would otherwise be discarded. County staff must inspect all eligible commercial food generators on an annual basis to ensure that the facility is meeting the record-keeping and contractual requirements. This will be done in tandem with our environmental health team, who already visit a number of these facilities annually. There are two separate categories of commercial food generators that the state's defined that will be scaled into these requirements. Tier 1 generators are defined as wholesale food vendors, food service providers, food distributors, grocery stores larger than 10,000 square feet, and supermarkets with more than $2 million in annual revenue. As of right now, there are approximately 120 of these types of generators identified in our jurisdiction. However, many of those generators do not produce edible food waste and will not be required to enter into an agreement with food recovery organizations. Those exempted facilities will still be subject to annual inspection to ensure that edible food is not being wasted. And some examples of those type of exemptions would go for our walnut and almond holders who use their waste in other ways, and it's not edible food. These Tier 1 generators were required to begin donating edible food beginning January 1, 2022, and an informative flyer was directly mailed to all the identified businesses in late November of 2021. County staff can begin inspections once this ordinance is formally adopted. Once identified, department staff will work on bringing commercial food generators who are not satisfactorily donating food into compliance by providing education and opportunity to correct the violation prior to any financial penalties. Tier 2 generators are defined as hotels with 200 plus rooms and on-site food facilities. Restaurants or state agency cafeterias larger than 5,000 square feet or 250 or more seats. Health facilities with 100 or more beds and on-site food facilities, large venues and events, and local education agencies with on-site food facilities. These generators will be required to begin donating edible food to food recovery organizations beginning January 1st, 2024. The total number of these facilities has not yet been identified, as there is not an active database that covers the various requirements. The county will begin providing educational information of the donation process in the coming months to the generators who fall into this tier. For some additional information, our residents and businesses can visit our Stanislaus Recycles webpage for more information at www.stanislausrecycles.org or contact our department staff at 525-6700. Our staff recommendation today is to introduce, waive the first reading, and order placement on the April 26, 2022 agenda for adoption of an ordinance related to solid waste and food recovery requirements, repealing and replacing chapters 9.02, 9.04, 9.08, 9.09, 9.10, and 9.12, and adopting a new chapter, 9.11, to the Stanislaus County Code to comply with the ordinance requirements of Senate Bill 1383. And with that, I'll open it up to questions from yourselves or the public.
Thank you, Will. Any questions for Will from the board? Supervisor Chiesa?
Yeah. First of all, I want to thank you. I know that the almond hullers and processors had some concern. Letters were sent out to them, and they don't have, organics, and you had gotten clarification from the state of California. Have we notified any of those folks that we originally sent out notifications to?
We haven't yet. I just got that email clarifying it this last week from CalRecycle, so we need to get a notice put together, and then we have to identify those who meet that that exemption.
Yeah, appreciate your quick work on that and the state's response.
Okay, thanks, Vito. Any other questions? This is just amazing that we're doing this, actually. This is, we talk about our unfunded mandates and things that we get stuck with here in the county, and just having this conversation about garbage police is just unbelievable that we're in this spot. And just real quick, Will, as far as the cost, I see one-time funding, the fiscal impact of this. I can see the one-time funding basically was just to try to cover our costs to set this thing up and go through the process, I think. Where does the cost what do we anticipate the cost to be for the garbage police to actually try to enforce these rules? Where's that going to come from, and how many do we have a budget for that at this point? Do we have any idea?
We haven't identified any additional staff at this time. That's not to say that we won't need more down the road, but our haulers are doing the contamination monitoring as is, and when they tag the carts, they would let us know. And our initial plan is to use our existing staff for the enforcement side of things at this time, but if it turns out to be a much larger workload increase, we would have to probably seek another staff position.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I got.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Will, for your report. With all of this coming on and that we're going to have to follow, one thing I can see that's going to happen is more illegal dumping along our rural roads and in our farms. Are we doing anything to increase the penalties for that?
I can't speak to that.
I haven't seen anything in the state legislature that would increase those penalties. We are limited by what's already in the codes. So
I would think that would be a good time to discuss reinforcing and hardening our illegal dumping code.
I agree, Buck. Sorry, this is just.
I have comments, but we'll wait.
Okay.
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Okay. All right, that's good. Anybody from the audience would like to speak or talk about this item? Stephen, come on up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is Stephen Morrow. As listening to the presentation, I referenced back to the comment by our citizen earlier today. Since we're going to be making some changes to the waste hauling county ordinance, would the point that she raised about offering two different sizes of cans, a 60-gallon and the current 96, would that be an authorized part that could be added to this ordinance when it's brought back for formal discussion on April 26th? Just a question on that. Thank you.
Thanks, Stephen. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the current process that we have that was approved by the board in the past year was to establish a 96-gallon cart across the board. The pricing that was on that was for grandfathered in accounts. If you notice on that sheet, there's also 1 can and 2 can, which is literally the small 30-gallon cans that you would manually load into these containers that have existed for a very long time. But we do have to set pricing for those to continue grandfathering them in, and that's why that pricing was on there. But at this time, our hauler's direction was to go with 96-gallon carts, so they would have to go out and purchase additional inventory, which would then have some effect on the rates, increasing overall overhead of maintaining that inventory and swapping those carts out. So there's a lot more to it than just a quick switch.
Do you think the people that had the 60-gallon containers before, those are gone now? Do you think they got rid of those? The haulers like Bertolotti got rid of those 60-gallon?
People who had existing 60-gallon service are allowed to keep that through. And then the other issue that we have is the cart colors have certain requirements now. So Bertolotti's carts have historically been green. Turlock Scavengers and Jilton's garbage carts have historically been black. And now with these new requirements, a green cart is for organics only. And so with the ordering process, they still have some inventory, but not ordered for the county. And we'd have to be able to have that available to all of our county residents.
So we could discuss this with the haulers, see what kind of cost would be involved, I guess, in that if we were to try to bring back the 60 and just see what that would entail, I guess.
Yeah, we could do that. The most important thing for us was to get the county into compliance with the state regulations, and then we can work things out as we get through it.
Perfect. Okay. Thanks, Will. Any other public comment with regard to this item? Okay, we will bring it back to the board for comment.
So you hit it on right on the head. And I'm not so worried about the county's cost on unfunded mandate, because it's the people's money that is paying for this, right, through taxes. And I feel actually sorrier for the ratepayers, because we see what this has created in rates, and a very laudable goal. And I don't want anyone to think that I'm against trying to divert organics from going to our landfill. But when you take this and then you take businesses, the tier 1 and tier 2, and you add on all the regulatory requirements that come with that, and the tracking and the bookwork, there's a cost associated with that comes out through the rates for the haulers, but conversely for the the Save Mart supermarket or a mom and pop store who's trying to divert, they're now going to track, they're going to have some regulatory requirements. So they're going to bore that cost. There's no place, or they pass it on to folks. So this is again, a laudable goal. It takes 61 pages for us to update, and repetition about labor disputes, and I know it was all in the bill, and I know we're complying, so I give you kudos, and it has nothing to do with staff when we complain. I think you know that well at this point, but it is just a tough go of raising rates from $12 to $34, depending on, and I think in Turlock I saw their rate increase because they already had a 3-can system. It's about $4 a month. So really going to hit the rural residents, which have, there's lower, or there's fewer people per square mile. So it's just average. And then back to the 60-gallon container, it would be good to offer that up, but the vast majority of our cost is not in the tipping fees. It's still in the trucks driving through the neighborhood labor costs. So there might be some incremental savings in the end. But for space, I do feel sorry for the folks, because 3 cans in a garage, if you have to pull them off the street, it's going to be difficult.
Okay.
Thank you, Caitlin and Will. Appreciate you guys.
Thanks, Rito. Any other comments or questions?
I have another question for Will. And in District 1, with the elimination of some of the recycling bins that were lost, has there been any more discussion with the haulers of bringing that back? And that's mostly in the tier areas of the census tract that eliminated that.
Yeah, and again, we'd have to take back to the board for formal approval, because the previous board, when we were given direction to move forward, was to apply for those low population census tract waivers. And in that eliminated some of those densely populated residential neighborhoods in North Salida, East Oakdale, and then some of the more rural communities like Grayson. So in order to be able to offer those services, it's going to be an additional truck, an additional driver. I don't know what the cost associated with that would be, what neighborhoods would want to be interested in bringing that back. But it would also, there's probably some legal concerns around having to be able to open it up to all of those residential communities that are in the same boat. So there would be additional cost. If there's a lot of drive to move that forward, we can certainly look into it, but it's going to cost more money, and it's a lot less efficient than it used to be.
Okay. I'd like to see if the haulers maybe have any ideas on maybe a way of bringing that back. Okay. Without too much of an increase. We all know it's going to increase, though.
If I could just provide a quick comment, I think, just to supplement some of what Will has shared. And for members of the public who might be hearing some of these things for the first time today, the changes at the state that required this real overhaul of our garbage hauling system have direct and real impacts to everyone's garbage rates. We had clear direction from the board to try to create the structure that would minimize that cost across the board as much as possible. So that's what we've done. And we've obviously had several areas where customers and individual circumstances have not appreciated whatever those changes were. But I do just want to make it very clear that we were trying to reduce that overall cost structure as much as possible across the board. And unfortunately, you can't make it perfect across the board, but as issues arise, we will go back to the garbage haulers, and if there's an appetite to raise rates to address some of these concerns, we'll put them back on the table for consideration. But I just want to be clear, it's like that was the direction we had, and that's everything we've tried to do so far.
All right. I'd like to just comment on that, Mr. Hayes, is that when that process was going forward in some of those census tracts, and one of my questions when that came forward was, are we communicating with those people that are going to lose those services, that recycling service? And talking with some of the people that complained about it, they had no idea until they received a letter on their garbage can that they were no longer receiving recyclable service. And so that was the first they had heard about it. And so I think that's the communication portion of that. They missed it completely. And, I don't know what we can do to bring that back. Obviously, there'll be a service increase, but I think that discussion needs to happen with our haulers.
Okay. Thanks, Buck. Yeah, I know we've all gotten calls, just the phone's been ringing off the hook about this, Will and Caitlin. Thank you guys very much. I know this has been a hard pill to swallow for everybody. And for, like we said up in North Salida, I know out in Buck's district, we've got these census tract areas that are exempt, and I've got calls saying, why are we left out? We want to be a part of this, and then I've got just as many calls of people that are glad they're left out, and so as we look to tweak this and try to make this thing work, maybe a little better, we're going to have to really be mindful of, we make an adjustment maybe because of one or two individuals, but we've got to make sure we really talk with everybody in these areas if we can make those adjustments, make sure that it is a majority that feel one way or the other. It's a very rough spot. So anyway, tough things to have to deal with when these things come down from the state. Like Vito said, laudable intentions. We all want to try to do things better, to recycle better, and all these things for the environment, but at what cost? And sometimes it seems like we don't see the forest, not us, but the state does not see the forest through the trees a lot of times in these things, and we're ending up with some abominations that they come up with. So that's where we are right now. Okay. Any other comments? Then we will look for a motion. Or not. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and make a motion to introduce and waive the first reading.
Second. We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you guys very much.
Thanks, Will.
Okay. We'll move on to item 7.2, approval to submit a notice to the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development Field Office regarding Stanislaus County's intent to form a new home investment partnership program consortium and serve as the lead entity. Planning and Community Development. Angela, good morning. How are you?
Good. Good morning, Chairman Withrow, members of the board, Mr. Hayes and Mr. Bose. I'm Angela Freitas, the Director for the Planning and Community Development Department. To help lead us in this discussion with regards to home this morning, Anna St. Nicholas, our Community Development Manager, will be presenting.
Anna, good morning to you.
Good morning. So this morning before you, we have the item 2, form or intent to form a new home consortium for the home program. Just trying to get you going.
It's all right. It'll kick in here in a second.
The downside of technology, I have to confess that I tell my staff that I don't want to sit anywhere near that laptop because I have this fear that it will not work for me.
Remember when we were in school, or probably here too, remember those overhead projectors where they'd have they'd put those slides on them and it would go up and go like out to there?
When we moved into this building, we had one that sat right here. I kind of miss it.
Those worked. It was always the light bulb went out. That was the only problem we had. The light bulb went out. Otherwise, we were fine.
And I apologize. It's always me.
It's okay.
Actually, I think we have one of those, and it's sitting over there by.
Is that right? Still
that might be the one that used to,
electronic one,
used to sit over here. And as great as PowerPoints are, if we can't get this to work here, we'll just go off script and we'll just...
Who needs a PowerPoint? All right, who needs a PowerPoint? So the home program is a federal program for housing. It has 4 main categories: rehabilitation of owner-occupied housing, assistance to home buyers, acquisition, rehabilitation, construction of rental housing, and also rental assistance. Now, the forming a home consortia allows for units of local government to form a group in order to not have to compete annually to the state for funding and to apply directly to the federal government, HUD, for home funding. Now, the City of Turlock, Stanislaus County Home Consortium, is the current makeup. The county became a part of that grouping on January 29, 1999, when the board authorized us to partner with the City of Turlock, who at that point had staff and the expertise and the manpower to man the grouping. Now, the Stanislaus Urban County, on another side, is led by the Stanislaus County Planning and Community Development as the administrator, oversees 7 of the 9 cities for federal funding for community development block grant, which includes Ceres, Houston, Newman, Oakdale, Patterson, Riverbank, and Waterford. Now, as members of this urban county to receive federal funding, they also become automatically part of the home consortium. Now, what does this change mean? With the forming of a new consortium, Turlock is now basically on its own for federal community development block grant funding. What remains the same is the urban county. The county will remain over the 7 cities and will include Turlock for the home program. So we'll be able to report on their annual accomplishments and planning for their home funding, but that is it. County will now be responsible for not just the reporting, but day-to-day operations, project development, overseeing that to the project closeout for, again, the home program and the CDBG program. So how did we get here? On January 25th, 2022, the Turlock City Council decided to resign as the lead consortium. They did want and direct their staff to assess how much it would cost them over the life of the projects, their legacy grants or financial risk. They also expressed interest to remain as a partner of the home consortia, and they were wanting to explore a possible 1-year agreement with HUD to remain or to have more time as part of the home consortium. On February 16, 2022, I submitted a written request by the city for a 30-day extension to request more time to decide to resign as the home consortium. And then on March 18, 2022, Turlock submitted a formal notice to HUD to resign as the home lead. Now, on the City Council meeting on January 25th, 2022, the county's planning director addressed the City Council, expressed the county's desire to continue to have Turlock be the lead entity. County is willing to take over as the lead entity, she stated, and if necessary, we can take it over to preserve home funds for the community. City staff has the expertise. County will be building it up from the ground up. January 26th and February 15th, county planning staff has had meetings with the City of Turlock and our HUD representative to kind of see the different scenarios and what's next. HUD has mentioned that this is new to them. They've never had a real shift in leadership on a home consortium, and that we would be pioneering through this together. And then on February 4th, independent meeting with our HUD representative, and we've had various other meetings again to kind of see how we can transition smoothly if Turlock decides to leave. February 18th, we did meet with the county's community development committee with Supervisor Graywall and Supervisor Withrow to bring them up to speed on what was going on and to explain the different scenarios and why Turlock and maybe leaving us the lead and what it would mean for the county to take it on. Now, February 22nd, 2022, there was a submitted written request to HUD by the county to ask for a 30-day extension as well. Now, what's next? April 1st. It's our deadline to formally notify HUD if the board chooses to proceed with the notice of intent to form a new home consortium. By June 30th of this year, we need to have a state certification notifying the state that we are changing leads, but the makeup of the home consortium is the same, and we align with the state on the goals for housing. And consortium agreements. We need one between all our cities, including Turlock, and we need a legal opinion from County Council on the formation of the new home consortium. By September 30th, the HUD deadline for determination to either approve us or reject the new home consortium. They will evaluate our ability and capacity, and if we have everything in place document-wise. And no later than August 16th, we are to submit a draft annual plan and any kind of changes to our citizen participation plan and con plan. We are working with HUD staff on this for further requirements and exact timing. Now, the consortium agreement considerations. HUD has given us guidance that we need a one-year agreement for our new consortium to align with our urban county. Because of the city grouping, they want to align both the home and the CDBG and just have it at the same time period for review of documentations and funding purposes. So the agreements will need to include the allocation and the use of funding by not just the county, but our cities that are under us, and our match funding. Where do we plan to receive this funding, and how will we be obtaining it and using it? Program income, what happens if we make any program income out of any of the projects or the cities? And then project selection, how do we work with the cities to prioritize their projects and allocation of funding? Now, planning staff will be working with the CDC, with HUD guidance on the exact terms and requirements of these agreements. Staff recommendation before you today is to authorize the Director of Planning to notify officially the HUD office of our intent to form a HUD consortium, and to authorize the Director of Planning and Community Development to do all actions that's necessary for the formation, and direct the Director of Planning to come back with the full documentation and application for submittal to HUD by June 30th. Any questions?
Very good, thanks, Anna and Angela. Okay, any questions for Anna or Angela?
Yeah, so Turlock is now not going to be a part of this consortium. Can they get in later, back into the consortium? As first question. Second, what obligations they continue to have with regarding past projects that might be still in the queue?
So Turlock's council does want them to remain as part of the consortium, but as a member instead of a lead entity. So as we move forward in forming this consortium and pulling together the agreements, we would be offering that up to Turlock. So they would actually never be out. They would just have a different role within it. As far as their ongoing legacy costs, they have, over the years, they've done homeowners assistance, they've done rehab projects, so they have to oversee all of that. The documentation, the reporting from all the money that came in for 20 years is something that they still continue to do. Plus they have program income that they also manage that they will have to continue to manage. And right now they have the home ARPA funding, which was in the amount of $5 million that will remain with Turlock, that they also have a responsibility.
And is that the $5 million of home ARPA money, is that competitive? I say competitive, but does it go through the same process of member agencies putting their projects forward?
Well, the City of Turlock has to develop a plan in order to form a strategic plan in order to allocate the money. So it's not decided yet. They could propose to do an allocation to all the member cities, or they could propose to just take in projects, ideas.
Okay. I just want the board to know, when this came up at the council meeting in Turlock, Angela and I had some discussions, and because we already do the emergency solution grants, we're the lead agency, and we are also on the emergency solution and the CDBG, Community Development Block Grants. The hard part here is in the transition, building the program, because Turlock has done a good job. Marin Pitt and Maria Ramos has overseen this program by all accounts from the member agencies. They've been doing a good job. Now we have to create something, even though we have some internal capacity, we don't have enough capacity. And I'm glad this went through the Community Development Committee. The chair and member Graywall were on that. And I think because now we have to build a plan, and the rules that come with that, it'd be good if it went back through that committee along with the staff to come up with how we see it needs to be spent. But I'm completely for this option, because or else people have to compete, or else when we have a consortium, the money is given to us. It's about $1.4 million right now, and there's just about enough for a fully burdened position. Close, anyways, $140,000. And so that will allow us to build capacity. And again, it's because we're lead on multiple things. I know Anna's not lacking for work, for sure. It'd be nice to have some help there. And I'm not sure what Maria's position is, or what they're going to do with their position. Maybe they're going to absorb it, but this seemed to be a cost measure. They didn't believe that it was worth it. At least that was my interpretation. I think you heard the same thing. And again, Angela, when you went back and spoke during their last meeting, you did a great job talking about, again, a burden on the county for this transition, but we're capable of doing it. And so I'm going to be fully supportive of this on a go-forward basis. And we just need to make sure we can get projects done, because that's really, I look at Avina Bella, what they've done, 2 phases in Turlock, utilizing some of this money, and there's good things, and we're not long on housing, for sure.
Very good. Thanks, Vito. Any other questions, comments? Buck?
Anna, Angela, thank you for the report. What happens by September 30th if HUD rejects the new home consortium?
If HUD were to reject the new home consortium, then each jurisdiction would be in a position of having to compete for funds through the State Housing and Community Development Department.
Okay, that'd be the last thing we'd want to do.
Right.
Just any other questions or comments? I'm just curious, the comment that you made, I think, Anna, was with regard to HUD said they had never had anybody resign before from,
Yeah.
I thought that was weird.
This is an interesting journey. They are, there's very little guidance out there, and what guidance there is, you can read it 2 or 3 different ways. I have to, Anna and I were kind of joking about this yesterday when Turlock first made their decision that they wanted out. One of their options was to stay in for a year, and HUD was very adamant in our conversations that there would be no 1-year extension. But last week, they notified us that if we're going to move forward with it, our first agreement will be for a year, because they need to bring us into alignment. So you couldn't have let Turlock stay for a year, brought us into alignment, and then we could have done this next year when we were a little bit more
Smoother
capacity.
transition, yeah.
So it's an interesting journey we're on.
Okay, thank you guys very much. Okay, anybody in the public, any comments with regard to this item? Seeing none, I will bring it back to the board for a decision here.
Motion to approve the 3 staff recommendations.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you guys very much. Okay, we'll move on to item 7.3, which is approval to add 4 new positions and reclassify 1 position to the Planning and Community Development Department allocation effective the first pay period following board approval. Couldn't do it quick enough. Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So this request before you to add 4 new positions and to reclassify 1 would take the department's total positions from 35 to 39. The positions that are being requested are within the department's planning services, which oversees administration of the county's general plan, the zoning and subdivision ordinance. It has oversight of the county's planning commission, the airport land use commission, and in part of those efforts does all the land use entitlements, environmental review and compliance, surface mining and reclamation act permitting, and has administrative oversight of the Williamson Act. Much of the administrative services overseen by planning services are ultimately implemented through the building permit and business license reviews, which are conducted by the planning services team. In addition to the services that are outlined on this slide, there's a lot of daily inquiries from property owners, architects, engineers, surveyors, developers, contractors, and the general public that are handled in person, by phone, by email, by the planning services team. The department's planning services team is currently supported by 8 existing positions. We have 2 manager 2-3s, which are classified as senior planners, 4 assistant associate planners, 1 staff services technician, which is our planning commission clerk, and 1 administrative assistant 3. All of those positions are currently filled with no vacancies. The planning department is requesting to add 4 new positions to support planning services, and that would be 1 manager 4, which would be the deputy director of planning services, 1 assistant associate planner, 1 staff services tech, and 1 administrative clerk 2. And the department is requesting to include reclassification of 1 existing position, that of an assistant director, to a manager 4. This position has been underfilled by manager 4 since 2008, and the finance and human resource functions that have been assigned to that position are now overseen by a manager 4, which is our finance and operations deputy director. The total cost for the new positions is just over $483,000, and those are salary and benefits costs, which would be funded by general fund. There are some additional costs that would include cubicle space and equipment, but the main cost would be $483,000 for salaries and benefits. Why the need for the positions? The department's requesting the position to address a number of different factors, from work volume increase. Over the last 5 years, we've seen phone calls up 37%, building permit applications up 11%, and land use entitlements up 52%. We're also, with taking things online, we now have 68% of all building permit applications are received online, which is wonderful. But when you lose that face-to-face interaction when permits are taken in, you end up with a lot of incomplete applications, which is resulting in added workload. We are also taking on a lot more an increase in housing activities, as we just saw with the item that was before you. We're taking on home. We're very active in the Housing Stanislaus effort. We are also implementing year 1 of the permanent local housing allocation, which will be an ongoing funding stream that also comes at about $1.3 million each year. And we've kicked off the 6th cycle housing element that needs to be done by December of 2023. So we are going to be very, very busy in the housing area. There's also just a need to shift from a reactive to a more proactive approach. We already know that there's a number of ordinance amendments that we need to change to comply with state regulations, and we want to explore more by right ministerial approaches so that we can kind of move away from having to go to Planning Commission and to the board, and we can just expedite and streamline the process. So this is all about workload management, avoiding burnout mistakes, and avoiding project delays, and also being able to deal with succession planning and vacancies and leaves of absence that do happen. So the 4 positions that we are requesting, the first would be the manager 4, which would have oversight of all planning services, including acting on behalf of me, the planning director, and making decisions without consultations. A new assistant associate planner working on land use entitlement applications, such as assisting with needed ordinance amendments. And with the housing efforts, we already know that we have 1 existing planner that is shifting towards housing activities. The staff services tech would support the front counter operations and serve as a liaison between customers, planners, and the county's one-stop shop partners. So this would really be in the area for building permits and kind of an ombudsman to take on more routine front counter phone and email customer inquiries and free up the planners to work on more complex projects. And then the administrative clerk 2 to free up the planning service administrative team to work on more complex and time-sensitive tasks by taking on more routine administrative tasks. So this next chart before you reflects the department's current organizational layout, with planning services reflected in the red circle. The department has 4 core function areas. We have building permit services off to the far left, community development off to the far right, and then planning services, and all of these services are supported by the finance and operations team, which is kind of center. Building and finance operations are supported by manager 4s. They're Denny Ferreira and Sam Groves, who is sitting behind me. And in the past, we have had 1 manager 4 overseeing both planning and community development, the planning and community development services. That model has proved inefficient given the diversity and growing volume of activity among the two services. So most recently, that Manager 4 position, which is now vacant due to retirement, had been assigned to Community Development Services, with Planning Services reporting directly to the Director. This second chart reflects where the department wants to go in its organizational layout, with the proposed new positions reflected in yellow, and again, Planning Services reflected in the red circle. It adds Manager 4 with independent oversight for Planning Services, the new Assistant Associate Planner and Staff Tech position to support current planning activities, and the new Administrative Clerk 2 to support the administrative team. This next slide shows both the existing and proposed organizational layouts. Again, the new Manager 4 position will provide a true independent leadership structure to oversee day-to-day operations, with the additional 3 positions providing the staff resources needed to effectively handle work volumes. So staff's recommendation before you this morning is to amend the salary and position allocation resolution to reflect staff changes described above under the staffing impact section of your report to describe, sorry, let me redo that. So we're amending the salary and position allocation resolution to reflect the staff changes that are described under the staffing impact section of your board report, effective the start date of the first full period following the Board of Supervisors approval. And with this recommendation, my presentation is complete, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the board members may have.
Very good. Thanks, Angela. Any questions from the board? Manny?
No. I was just saying, we've all been, I'm assuming all been briefed on it, and we can see that the positions are much needed. Just in my district, I know the number one issue is planning, and I always tell them that we're working on it, but obviously because of staffing issues, it impacts an expeditious response, which in some instances, it can never be too expeditious for them. But I do appreciate the fact that what you've been doing with the amount of staff that you have, but hopefully with this new allocation of staff, things get more expeditious and more streamlined. Thank you.
We're going to do our best.
Thanks, Manny. Yeah, I know it seems like the more, besides garbage, the most calls we've been getting has been with regard to issues of planning, and we know you guys have had your hands full, and when we had the briefing on this, it was a 2-second conversation for me. Let's get this going as quick as we can to try to help you guys out. One question is, how optimistic are you about as far as being able to find these people, these 4 new positions, and fill them? It's a rough market out there right now.
I'm going to stay very optimistic. Okay. We have had in the planner area, we've had a lot of great success in bringing in trainees and training them from within. So I'm hoping that we continue with that, and we're on track to kind of hit the end of the college cycle. So hopefully, some recent graduates that don't have some experience there. Perfect. Staff Services Tech offers some good opportunities for growth. So maybe some internal candidates. So we're hopeful.
Good. Good. How's our recruiting HR, how are we, I'm looking at Jody, sorry, recruiting HR, college campuses, how are we doing?
On college campuses specifically?
Yeah,
I'll actually ask staff, our HR team to come up and speak to those efforts.
We keep talking about our vacancy rate, 16% vacancy rate across the county. We always are whining. Maybe we can see what we're doing about it.
Good morning, Chairman. Tamara Thomas, County HR Director. We are working with the departments pretty closely, quite frankly, on where we have those hard-to-fill, hard-to-retain positions, working very closely with the colleges as to intern opportunities, both paid and unpaid. We're looking at unpaid right now. We have a little bit of a hurdle to get over between CSU and the county's contracting mechanisms, but we certainly have earned intern positions available paid at the clerical community level. So those are opportunities that we do reach out to the colleges, both MJC, CSUS. Departments are doing that work with their recruitment staff to encourage participants. Just spoke with probation yesterday. They are very active in that development related to bringing in interns, and it's working well for them. We just need to get them to stay once we've got them here, and that's a great opportunity for interns to get a look at the county opportunities for employment. We would love to do more of that kind of intern work. It's something that we're going to be talking about with our CEO this week, as well as with all other departments who have not taken advantage of those opportunities. But we do have dialogue with many of the professors, many of the chairs of those departments in our local colleges, and look forward to building additional relationships with them so that we can bring that opportunity to students who are on the verge of graduating or getting ready to enter the workforce. Happy to answer any questions related to that.
Any questions for Tamara? Perfect. Thanks, Tamara, for coming up here so quick. And
of course, thank you.
That's good. That's good. Marketing for us there for the hundreds of thousands of people who are watching online tonight, this morning. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions?
Just a quick comment. I think this is pretty easy because we usually scrutinize new positions pretty hard, especially when you hit the general fund. But in this department, when you have, and I think that I receive the most calls, I have the most interaction with the planning department. People call to fix a pothole, but when it's a planning issue, it's usually complicated and it takes a lot of time. And it's not from a lack of effort on anyone's part in the planning department, but when we go through these boom-bust cycles, we're always afraid of the next bust cycle. So you don't fill these positions, especially if they're general fund, because it's harder to get rid of those positions. So we're always slow on the curve, and now we're in a boom cycle, more of a boom cycle. And I'm glad we need to, I think I said that we need to take the mountains and the valleys out and make it a little smoother, some rolling hills, and give your staff some more help, because the timing for most businesses is never fast enough. When people are ready to go, they get financing, and they want to start building. And it's a very complicated process to get through the planning department and all the state requirements that come with that. So I'm really excited about this, and I know that I personally spend, on my personal side as a farmer, I spend more time in Angela's office just trying to work through my own issues, which is not fair. And I know where they live, I know their home numbers, I know just about everything, in case I need them on a Sunday. You guys, I'm lying. I've never visited them on a Sunday. But it would be typical of me to call after 5 o'clock. And anyways, thank you for bringing something forward. I tell the department heads, if you need something, you need to ask for it. Doesn't mean you're going to get it, but if there's a true need, which I see this as a true need, I'm very supportive.
Very good. Okay. Any other questions, comments? We'll look for a motion then.
Motion to approve.
Second.
A motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you all very much for the support.
Very good. Okay, we will move on now to item 7.4. Approval to accept the Mental Health Service Oversight and Accountability Commission Mental Health Student Services Act grant. Okay. Good morning, guys. Okay, I'm going to sneak out while you guys are getting ready here real quick.
All right. Do we start? Supervisor Withrow? Well, I guess we'll hear him come back. We'll wait. Wait. All right.
Sorry, guys.
No problem. Good morning, Chairman Withrow, Supervisors, CEO Hayes, and Council Bowes. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Ruben Imperial, and I'm the Behavioral Health Director. Joining me is Cara Anguiano, BHRS's Chief Fiscal and Administrative Officer. Thank you for introducing the topic here today. Behavioral Health and Recovery Services was awarded funding from the Mental Health Services Oversight and Accountability Commission for the a Mental Health Student Services Act grant. We are here today to request approval to accept the grant funds for brief intervention counseling services and execute all the related agreements and amend the salary and position allocation resolution to reflect related BHR staffing impacts. I'd like to start off with a brief overview of the purpose of the grant program. It is designed to enhance county partnerships with school-based programs, expand access to mental health services for children and youth, and facilitate linkages and access to ongoing services. This grant will accomplish this with our partners with Stanislaus County Office of Ed and our service providers by working on goals and strategies to address school climate broadly and creating the partnerships and administrative infrastructure to serve children amongst schools, BHRS, managed care plans, commercial health plans, and most importantly, our families as well. Next slide. Oh, I'm doing it. I'm sorry. I kept relying on you, but I'm doing it. Okay. And I wanted to point back to our strategic plan and our overall children's system of care. You will notice that in the middle of this diagram, there are several boxes that identify our outpatient specialty mental health programs, including our high-intensity programs, our mid-intensity, our early intervention programs, and our school behavioral health services. And you'll notice at the top of the slide, we've got 4 main areas in pathways on how children and families access children's system of care services through our collaborative partnerships with education, child welfare, probation, and culture collaboratives through our network of diverse community partners, our community emergency response team, and then our crisis and support line. And this partnership is focusing on deepening our capacity and capability and partnerships with our collaborative partners and helping facilitate, when needed, access to mental health services or through the interventions that we'll talk about today, serve students and their families. So the strength of our strategic plan and the hope of impacting broad mental health outcomes in our community is going to rely on our partnerships. And this one is, this grant is focused on strengthening those partnerships with education. Our 2 large and primary children's service providers, Center for Human Services and Sierra Vista Child and Family Services, and then most importantly, our local school districts that we connected with and reached out to partner in this endeavor. Our Office of Education partners will be supporting these initiatives through interventions that are focused on building the overall capacity of our systems and our community partners to work together. They will focus on the prevention services and supports, focused on student behavioral health and wellness and enhancing school climate for targeted school districts. Activities will promote mental health awareness, screening, referrals, and navigation. The supports will help school-age children, youth develop skills to promote resiliency and pro-social behaviors, avert development of mental and behavioral health disorders, and prevent youth violence. So their staffing and support is going to be built on building the partnerships for us to work together and supporting these types of services on school campuses. And it's a very important part of this grant to have that capability to do that. And for we're really grateful that the Stanislaus County Office of Ed agreed to take on that role. They're often asked to take on many roles in this type of situation to facilitate partnerships between, for instance, a large agency like BHRS. And they have their work, they have their mission as an organization, And we are grateful that they saw the value in partnering with us and putting resources and time into this project with us. So we appreciate them, and they are here today with us as well and available for questions in this area. And then most importantly, our school district partners. We reached out broadly to the school districts throughout the county and made a request for school districts that were interested in partnering with us in this. These are the school districts that we are initially working with, that have initially responded and have agreed to participate. This does not limit the work that we do to these school districts, especially for Stanislaus County Office of Ed staff. The way they operate, they provide a broader way of services to school districts. And although that these are the initial partners, there's no limit in terms of us providing these services and letting other districts participate, especially in these school climate and capacity building activities. SCOE will provide a project coordinator and a program support specialist to coordinate the school climate strategies, prevention services, and support, and collaborate with BHRS, our contractor providers, and the school district. They will also assist the districts in developing or refining a culturally and developmentally appropriate school-based mental health system and strategy, and they will also assist districts in developing or refining systems to track students' referrals made to school or community-based mental health providers, and establishing mental health referral pathways for their own school-based mental health services, or any other referrals made to community-based partners, including, for instance, like managed care and those mild to moderate services. So this is an opportunity for us to add additional staffing to do the work that, you know, everybody wants to partner, everybody willing to show up to a meeting, everybody will, you know, but we need staff when we walk away to do the work and to follow up and to get all this done. So we appreciate the Stanislaus County Office of Ed of working with us and making this happen. With MHSA grant funding, SCOE will also provide professional development trainings, which will focus on supporting students' mental health needs. Training subjects may include, but are not limited to, the titles that we've shared here today. The contract providers, Sierra Vista and Center for Human Services, will provide the brief intervention counseling services, and distinct from, for instance, higher level of treatment, big services are short duration, low intensity. There'll be referrals from school staff, and you saw previously that staff will be trained and educated on how to make referrals. So there will be screening and referrals for children and youth, and then we'll do individual or group brief intervention counseling sessions. These services can be provided on school campus or in a family resource center, where not only mental health services can be provided, but additional basic needs and case management and other types of services for families and children are also provided as well. But these services, the brief intervention counseling services, can either be provided at the school site or at one of the local family resource centers. And so you notice that these family resource centers are located in the areas where these school districts are located as well. So they will serve as the hub and a place where services can be projected out as well. And they are primarily located in some of our underserved areas that we've identified. I'm going to hand it over to Kara now to talk about staffing and budget.
Thanks, Ruben. The Mental Health Student Services Act grant will require significant coordination of efforts between the 4 partner entities: BHRS, Stanislaus County Office of Education, Sierra Vista Child and Family Services, and Center for Human Services, as well as the partnering school districts. BHRS is requesting a staff services coordinator position to coordinate efforts, and the position will be fully funded by the grant. This recommendation will increase the department's total position allocation from 471 to 472. At the end of the grant period, if other funding is not identified for continued support of the position, the department will return to the Board of Supervisors with a request to delete it. BHRS, as the lead agency, applied for the grant on January 7th, and on February 7th was awarded $4 million for the period March 1st, 2022 through June 30th of 2026. BHRS received the grant agreement from the grantor on February 24th and began drafting the agreements with partner agencies for the provision of services and also preparing the staffing request. The grantor has stated that the grant period will be effective March 1st through 2022, and for this reason, BHRS is requesting retroactive approval. The grant award totals $4 million over a 4-year period. Grant funding will be used to execute an agreement with Stanislaus County Office of Education for $1.6 million and change, Sierra Vista Child and Family Services for a little bit more than $1 million, and Center for Human Services in the amount of a little more than $500,000, retroactive for the period March 1st through June 30th of 2026. The remaining $756,394 in grant funds will be utilized by BHRS for staffing and administrative costs associated with oversight of the grant and to comply with all terms and conditions of the award. Sufficient appropriations and estimated revenue for services through June 30th of 2022 were included in the department's fiscal year 2021-2022 adopted final budget. Appropriations and estimated revenue for the remaining grant period will be included in subsequent budget cycles. There is no impact to county general fund. So we have 9 staff recommendations in front of you today, lots, so I will go ahead and read those. So the first one, authorize the Behavioral Health Director or designee to accept the Mental Health Services Oversight and Accountability Commission Mental Health Student Services Act grant in the amount of $4 million retroactively for the period of March 1st, 2022 through June 30th of 2026. Authorize the Behavioral Health Director or designee to sign and execute all related agreements, contracts, amendments, or other documentation required for implementation of the MHS-OAC MHSSA grant. Number 3, approve an agreement with Stanislaus County Office of Education for prevention services and support focused on behavioral health and wellness in the amount of $1,673,512, retroactively for the period March 1st, 2022 through June 30th of 2026. Number 4, authorize the Behavioral Health Director or designee to sign and execute the agreement with SCO and to sign amendments to the SCO agreement for additional services and payments for services up to $200,000, budget permitting, throughout the term of the agreement. Number 5, approve an agreement with Sierra Vista Child and Family Services for brief intervention counseling services in the amount of $1,037,621 retroactively for the period March 1st, 2022 through June 30th of 2026. Number 6, authorize the Behavioral Health Director or designee to sign and execute the agreement with Sierra Vista Child and Family Services and to sign amendments to the SVCFS agreement for additional services and payments for services up to $200,000, budget permitting, throughout the term of the agreement. Number 7, approve an agreement with Center for Human Services for brief intervention counseling services in the amount of $532,473, retroactively for the period March 1st, 2022 through June 30th, 2026. Number 8, authorize the Behavioral Health Director or designee to sign and execute the agreement with CHS to sign amendments to the CHS agreement for additional services and payments for services up to $200,000, budget permitting, throughout the term of the agreement. And finally, number 9, amend the salary and position allocation resolution to reflect the recommended changes outlined in the staffing impact section of this report, effective the first full pay period after Board of Supervisors approval. And thank you for your time. Staff are available to answer any questions that you may have.
That's perfect. Kara, could you go through those 9 items again one more time?
I'd love to, Chairman Withrow.
You were mumbling.
Am I good at that? Should I come to him for all the agenda items? Okay.
No, thank you. That was great. Thank you
Okay.
very much. Okay, any questions from the board?
It's a question, but I was at a Denier Mac, and Dr. Metzger, who's the superintendent, was talking about embracing a program, mental health program. Is this the program? No, this is not the one.
Yeah. You want to come up, Nancy, and introduce yourself?
That is great. Nope, come on up. The public needs to hear you. I think that's great. So, Dr. Metzger was talking about, but I thought it was a county or SCO was offering some services, but they embraced, and so far, I mean, and she was just like glowing, and I didn't quite catch everything because I was having a side conversation, so.
If you just introduce yourself, and we'll, both of you, please, thank you.
Hi, I'm Nancy Davis, Director 2 in the Prevention Department at Stanislaus County Office of Ed, and I brought up with me
Jennifer Baker, I'm MTSS Coordinator at the Office of Education.
So Jennifer does a lot of our work on the mental health team that I supervise, but Dr. Metzger is very forefront working with Legacy Endowment, and she and Houston have brought in a lot of staff and student wellness in addition to the mental health. A lot of things that we do are grant funded in around mental health and well-being right now with different grants, so we're trying to make sure we're reaching out and covering as many people as possible with our trainings and support and working on those referral pathways. And so Jennifer will be working closely with the people we bring on in our department to go out to the schools and make those connections with BHRS, with the schools, and just getting those supports and pathways in place. So we feel it's best time ever right now with what we're looking at moving forward.
It's great. I just, and then that just brings up the question. This is like hopefully a force multiplier rather than doing the same, whatever Legacy's doing. I'm a little bit familiar with it. But, okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Nancy and Jennifer. Thank you, guys. Any other questions for Buck? Go ahead.
Ruben and Kara, thank you for the report. Yesterday, we talked about not all the school districts are participating in the first part. Is that? Oh, congratulations, one, on getting the grant. I'm sure it was competitive. But homeschool kids and charters usually work under a school district, right? Or are affiliated with a school district?
I'm not, yeah.
And so they would also be covered if they were under?
I will talk about.
Sorry, guys.
I will talk about specific. Yes, if you want to go ahead and talk about any of that relationship, I could also talk about just in general schools. I mean, any kid available, services available. But you want to talk about that relationship between the schools and the charter school and the homeschool.
Yes, when there's a need with the charter school affiliated with school, we are there for the support for the whole district, and that includes where our people will go out and have those conversations. So when they say there's a need there, we're going to match up where the need is with the services. So if it's the charter school, if it's on campus, with families to resource center, we're going to work on all of that. So yes, it'll cover.
Okay, great, thank you.
Wherever the
thank
need
you
is.
very
I'm going
much.
to stand here for just another second.
Just in case, yeah. Thanks, Buck.
That's all.
Okay, any other questions?
Just a comment. This is great. This is something I've heard from our school board members locally as far as the need and services. So I'm just applauding you guys. Great work. Looking forward to it, and definitely going to be vital moving forward for our students.
Thanks, Chance.
We're very excited to partner.
Okay, now you can sit down.
Sure? Okay.
Thank you. We're good. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you.
Any questions from the public with regard to this item? Okay, seeing none, bring it back to us. Just real quick, this is the good stuff. This is some of the good stuff that we do here, and it's money well spent here to be able to invest, in our kids, and the return on our investment is going to be great here. We're always trying to all the stuff we do with our homeless, and trying to deal with them. But if we want to stop that pipeline of homeless, we need to get involved at the kind of the root cause, which we talk about, which is at our schools, and deal with mild to moderate issues now more than ever. Mild to moderate issues. The county we're severe mental illness. That's what we do. But if we want to reduce that population, we've got to get in with these kids and deal with the mild to moderate issues. So what's so good about this, so many good things about this, but it's just the collaboration with the schools and with SCOE to be doing this. I remember a big aha moment for me was a few years back. I always talk about this when we were sitting at a mental health board presentation and we had a school district come in. I think maybe Ceres. Ceres came in. This was a couple of years ago. And they went through this elaborate presentation about their mental health department. Basically, it was their mental health department. I'm thinking, you have a mental health department? We have a mental health department. How many? And then we find out, what are there, 26, 27 school districts out there? And everybody's got a mental health department, their mental health work that they do. But there was no collaboration at all. Everybody was in their own little silos doing their own thing. And I got to commend you, Ruben, and for all that you're doing here the conversations that we've broken through that, and now with SCOE and with the school districts, hopefully we'll get I know we've targeted these 11, but hopefully we'll get other ones involved in this. And this is where we're really going to, break the cycle, right? We're going to break these chains that are out there. And like I said, now more than ever, we've got to deal with this after COVID. So I think this is really good stuff, and it will go a long ways towards us getting more involved with our school districts, which is really at the place where we need to be to try to break these chains and our next generations of people with severe mental illness, if we can catch them early. And the schools are in a perfect spot to do it. And that's where we need to direct all our attention and partner with. So I totally support this and appreciate all the work you're doing. So
yeah, I'd like to highlight, I think it's important, although the grant does provide us extra staffing and resources to focus on a set of districts in a real focused way. This work is also occurring throughout all the districts. Carrie McGee and Kim, our children's management team, and SCOE, we do meet monthly, and we do have regular planning sessions. I'm currently working with Scott Kuykendall, the Stanislaus County Office of Ed, of actually mapping out throughout the entire county how many clinicians do the school districts have now, and how many children are they seeing, and how many kids are on their caseloads, and then to match them up with what we're doing and with what managed care is doing. So although the grant gives us some extra manpower to do it in this area, this is emanating from work that's being done through the broader partnerships between Stanislaus County Office of Ed and ourselves and our managed care partners and our school districts. So we're excited about it. When you have the little bit extra resource to do it for, and you'll notice a lot of them are in the rural, smaller districts, it gives us a little bit more manpower to support them a little bit more. Often they are the underserved populations because of how far they are away from, like, for instance, Modesto, and where we have more of our services. So I do just want to highlight that the work is extending beyond these grant folks, and we do look forward to returning soon to the Board of Supervisors with an update on our strategic plan on additional initiatives that are underway in addition to these great ones that you're hearing about today. So
that's great, Ruben. Yeah, I, again, commend you and, like you said, for sure, the school districts and SCOE that are all working with us now. I know those calls started about a year or so ago. You guys start doing that,
yeah.
And that was just great to actually get on the phone with everybody and start to talk about each district and what they're doing and how we can coordinate with them. So this is how we make a difference and how we make changes. And I, again, continue to commend you guys on the work you're doing. So, okay. With that, we will look for a motion.
Motion to approve all 9 recommendations.
We have a motion.
I'll second.
Motion and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you guys very much. Ruben, Kara, thank you. Okay. Let's move on to our next. Item 7.5, approval to accept the California Department of Health Care Services Crisis Care Mobile Units Grant.
all right. I hope it's becoming obvious with the grant that was just approved a few weeks ago for the brief intervention counseling, what you just heard a few moments ago, what you're hearing today. We've been really, really busy applying for grants. And I want to thank Kara and her team. Karen Service, our grant writer, has just done an excellent job and a high rate of success. So we have just been excited about these partnerships. Even though we have a grant writer, it takes a lot of work from our staff, so I want to appreciate them. In addition to all the things that they're doing day to day, they also take the time here to make sure that we have successful grant applications. So we were also awarded funding from the California Department of Health Care Services Crisis Care Mobile Units grant program. We are here today to request approval to accept these funds and amend the salary position and the salary and position allocation resolution to reflect related staffing impacts. I'd like to start off with a brief overview of the purpose of the grant. I will provide services to individuals experiencing behavioral health crisis, including mental health crisis, substance use crises, or co-occurring mental health and substance use crisis. Given the challenges with fentanyl overdose and other substance use related issues that you've been hearing about from us, we are now really making sure that any of our crisis services also focus on SUD or co-occurring issues. The funds will be used to implement and expand mobile crisis services in Stanislaus County on a limited basis. until further strategies are identified. Again, I do want to highlight and point back to our strategic plan. And in the strategic plan, we identified several initiatives that the department would be working on even as we implemented the strategic plan. And that work has unfolded. And I probably was going to mention earlier the continuum of care development down there with Cal-Aim. That is part of the work that we've been doing with school districts. But several initiatives, we included the mobile crisis response plan and the crisis and support line, shelter and housing, residential treatment for both mental health and SUD. And so these grants and the funding that we are taking advantage of that is being released at the state level are in line and continue to deepen our commitment and our capability to implement our strategic plan. So I wanted to make sure that as we go through these initiatives, you're understanding where does this fit in our current strategy. And I want to highlight that the services we're talking about today are going to span the continuum of care. As Supervisor Withrow mentioned in our previous presentation, that the department does focus on when it comes to the treatment services. Our mandated population is the individuals with severe or substance use disorders that are severe with functional impairment. There's a whole criteria that we have. And also, the mandate we have for the broader community is the crisis services, the 5150 function. That's the service that we provide broadly, in addition to those outpatient treatment services that we talked about when our strategic plan was implemented. So to implement these crisis services, we are going to need to be working with managed care plans and private health plans and law enforcement partners, making sure that the folks that we engage through these crisis services are supported in the back end. And I wanted to bring this up in the beginning of the presentation because there are some staffing implications in terms of why we brought on some case managers as part of our crisis intervention team to ensure that as we're contacting individuals through crisis services, we have that manpower to make sure that we facilitate proper referrals and if needed, both to managed care or commercial health plans or to our services for uninsured and for the Medi-Cal population. And again, I want to point back to our strategy. As with children, those middle line of boxes represent our outpatient programs. We have contracts with Telecare, Turning Point, as well as we have county-operated outpatient teams. And as with children, we have 4 or 5 areas in which individuals access those mental health outpatient services. And those 2 boxes on the right represent our community emergency response team, which provides those 5150 crisis services. These are the folks that have the authority to do that crisis assessment and hold individuals or authorize holds for individuals that are meeting that criteria. And then also our crisis and support line. In our strategic plan, we identified that we would be aligning 2 call centers that we had, one that scheduled appointments and one that dealt with crisis. We identified in the strategy that we were going to be aligning those services and that would create a better outcome in terms of individuals calling us and getting the help they need. It was one of the, I would say, highest frequent feedback that we had from the community in terms of accessing services was our call center and the phone numbers that we had. And we are working on implementing that fully by July. So in these areas, there's been some work that we've been doing, and it's aligned with what we're doing here. So this grant is not a standalone strategy. It's aligned with several other efforts that are reinforcing our strategic plan. So first of all, the Access and Crisis Line merger, that work's occurring. It's going to create a one team, one number for the community to call in times of crisis, and then for Medi-Cal beneficiaries or the uninsured, for instance, to get outpatient mental health services. We brought to you the Brief Intervention Counseling Team expansion, I think it was last week or
On the 8th.
On the 8th. And this was a team that created a team, this was a program that created a team so that as individuals were accessing our crisis and support line and calling in, we had a team that could immediately follow up with them even while they're waiting for an assessment. So if you go back to the previous slide, folks call in, then they're scheduled for an assessment, and then they get into treatment. This team that we did with the brief intervention counseling is to expand services so that even as they were waiting for assessment, we had a team to follow up with them, and if needed, go out in community settings, especially through the rural communities, and provide immediate services and support even in community settings. So again, it's still deepening our strategy. We feel, I feel it's important to know where these investments are being made to strengthen our strategy. This now adds what we call mobile crisis expansion, meaning instead of where currently our community emergency response team primarily does the 5150 function for individuals that are brought into the emergency room after they've been placed on a 5150 hold in the emergency room, for instance, by law enforcement. We now will be able to embed clinicians to ride along with police officers in Modesto. We are working on a strategy with Sheriff Dirksky that we'll explain a little bit more about in a few moments. And in addition to that, we're doing an access campaign. We have redirected prevention and early intervention staff and other staff to basically go out and reach out to almost any identified nonprofit, community-based organization, anyone that has any contact with individuals regarding a potential referral, to educate them on how to access mental health services. Just to give you an example, we met with the bishop of the San Joaquin Regional Diocese for the Catholic Church and met with him and educated him, and he's now working with us to educate his priest and the leaders of his local congregations as they're doing counseling and supporting their members. They're educated on how to access, for instance, crisis services, which will be our access line, or mental health counseling through their managed care plans or their commercial health plans. So, now, the initial partnership for mobile crisis is going to be with the police department here in Modesto and the Stanislaus County office, the Stanislaus County Sheriff's Office. And we are currently in planning phases. I've been participating with the city of Modesto's Forward Together and other planning initiatives that we've had. And one of the emerging strategies is that there would be clinicians that are embedded with police officers to respond to mental health crises and mental health 911 calls. I've also been working with Sheriff Dirksky through his Project Resolve initiative, and there are other things that he is also working on, and will at some point come back to the board with some recommendations. But these are the initial partners. Mobile crises in the community include, for instance, responding into homes, to school sites, to workplaces, or other community-based locations. Again, in this, as we implement these programs, we will further refine what this list looks like, but in general, that's how it looks. 911 calls, crisis-related services. So, for instance, in the city of Modesto, they get anywhere from, I think 177,000 a year in calls. They've got probably about 15,000 calls on a monthly basis. About 1,600 of those are related, to instance, for 5150 or mental health type situations. So we would be riding along, for instance, with Modesto Police Department, doing triage, screening, crisis assessment, de-escalation, resolution of conflict. We would have staff available also to follow up with peer support, coordinate other medical services if needed, and most importantly, coordination with behavioral health services. And not just our services, but other services that are available in the community, and of crisis planning and follow-up. We've also have staff that would be able to provide follow-up services for individuals that were contacted through these services. The anticipated outcomes for this program is to prevent and divert from criminal justice involvement or system involvement. We also would hope to decrease transport for emergency psychiatric holds. We feel that there might be some alternatives and some diversions that we'd be able to offer as these programs further developed. The staffing structure that we've put in place for this would be a manager that would oversee the program and further develop the partnerships. Although we've been started with the city of Modesto and the sheriff's office, we know that there is interest with, for instance, non-contract sheriff police departments in this model as well. So our initial conversations have also included how would we connect up with some of these other cities beyond the contracted cities with the sheriff and the city of Modesto. But the model right now, as it calls for, is a team that would be embedded with the police department. We'd have 2 clinicians that would be embedded with them. And then the sheriff's office, we'd also have 2 clinicians as well. Then we have that what we call the infrastructure support, which are case management and peer support to follow up and to help and the back end with any connections to whether it's county mental health or other mental health providers in the community. So as we are implementing this program, our planning will continue with the police department and the sheriff's office. So we're working with MPD and the sheriff's office to develop a future staffing model. Whatever we do in both those planning process will supplement these CCMU grant-funded positions. The goal is to expand services provided to the community, and we will make sure to return as we finalize any of those plans. The need for us to ask for to implement and to move forward with this grant now is we do need time for recruitment, and we do need time to make sure that we expend these funds within the allocated time for the grant. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Kara.
Thank you again, Ruben. All right, I get to do the super fun part. So BHRS applied for the grant on January 5th, and on February 14th was awarded $3,999,988. It's too bad we couldn't find another $2, right? For the period of February 15th through June 30th, February 15th, 2022 through June 30th of 2025. And right after the award, BHRS immediately began preparing the staffing requests. And the grantor has also stated that this grant award will be retroactive to February 15th. For this reason, BHRS is requesting retroactive approval. Sufficient appropriations and estimated revenue for services through June 30th of 2022 were included in BHRS's 2021-2022 adopted final budget. Appropriations and estimated revenue for the remaining grant periods will be included in subsequent budget cycles. There is no impact to County General Fund with the approval of this agenda item and related actions. So for staffing impacts, the CCMU program will be operated by BHRS staff, and as a result, the department is requesting 1 block budgeted manager 1-2, 4 block budgeted mental health clinician 1-2s, and 4 block budgeted behavioral health specialist 1-2 positions to provide mobile crisis services. The 9 positions being requested with this agenda item will be fully funded by the CCMU grant. This recommendation will increase the department's total position allocation from 472 to 481. At the end of the grant period, if other funding is not identified for the continued support of the positions, BHRS will return to the department, will return to the Board of Supervisors with a request to delete them. I'm happy to say we only have 3 staff recommendations with this one. So, whoops, let me go back. I skipped a slide and I can't get my own page to turn. So number 1, authorize the Behavioral Health Director or designee to accept the California Department of Health Care Services Crisis Care Mobile Unit grant to provide mobile services to individuals experiencing behavioral health crises in the amount of $3,999,988. retroactively for the period of February 15th, 2022 through June 30th, 2025. Number 2, authorize the Behavioral Health Director or designee to sign and execute all related agreements, contracts, amendments, or other documentation required for implementation of the DHCS CCMU grant as outlined in this report. And number 3, amend the salary and position allocation resolution to reflect the recommended changes outlined in the staffing impacts section of this report, effective the first full pay period after the Board of Supervisors approval. And with that, we are available for any questions you may have.
Very good. Thank you, Ruben and Kara. Again, any questions from the board? Supervisor.
Recruiting and retention in mental health clinicians a little more difficult than probably planning department. Do the PD and the SO understand that if we can't recruit, we'll struggle with this position?
Yeah, correct. And we do anticipate, as with all our other positions, having significant challenges. And we've developed some recommendations in terms of the planning that's unfolding with them on alternatives, maybe non-licensed folks to support. We're looking at other models throughout the state right now where you can pair a clinician with a non-licensed person, and they're done by necessity. But we of course prefer a licensed mental health provider, but we are exploring other options, and both our partners are well aware of the challenges we face with recruitment. The other thing I would say, though, that what we've also, I think, what I've learned with other directors throughout the state that might help is by adding another type of function within the county, working with law enforcement, adding this type of job to our list of, or our portfolio of jobs will hopefully attract some clinicians that want to get involved and do this work. I know I've personally talked to clinicians that want to do this. They want to focus on this, and the county is pretty much the only organization that can perform this type of 5150 function along with a law enforcement officer. So we're hoping that this also creates another group of clinicians and graduates that want to get into this field and work with law enforcement and respond to these types of calls. So those are all part of, I think, several challenges that we're facing in the state when it comes to recruitment, and hopefully some hope of attracting some folks too.
Thank you.
Ruben, could you just talk really quick about what you're trying to do with CSUS? I think we've talked about that a little bit as far as expanding their program, trying to figure out a way to help fund that. I know they have an impacted program right now. For long term, what we're really looking to try to find more.
Yeah, in addition, we appreciate the CEO's Human Resource Department have been partners on several initiatives, and I know that Tamara was up here mentioning some of those broader system-wide, county-wide ones. One of the ones that we're doing specifically in our department, though, is working with Stan State. And when I mean working with them, it's working to expand the number of clinicians that they train on a yearly basis. The Stanislaus state system, or the CSU system across the country, or the state actually, turns away hundreds of students that want to get in the field. And so we sent a recommendation to our regional elected leaders, as well as the governor, recommending that we expand the number of teachers and the social work program at Stan State to increase the number of individuals that they're training to be social workers and clinicians. A lot of the strategies have been primarily focused on incentives and scholarship and stipends, and what we're seeing is that's going to still only support the same number of students that are graduating every year. What we're now requesting, and what we've partnered with Stanislaus State, Alan John and her team, is to request that we receive some funds locally, especially in the Central Valley, where we already face a very significant challenge of mental health provider workforce issues, to specifically expand that program here in our community. So
that's great. Hopefully good stuff will come out of that. Any other questions? Buck?
Ruben, Kara, again, congratulations on another significant grant. Specifically with the team, is that 24/7, 365? Once it gets established, they'll be out in the field?
Yeah, the current staffing structure doesn't staff up to a 24/7 model. This planning that we do with MPD and the sheriff office, it remains to see what level of staffing is needed. We're looking at data, across the day and across the week, in terms of where are the calls coming in the most for those types of calls that we need. So those plans are still unfolding, and the determination long term of what that looks like still needs to be determined. What we're doing with this grant and what we're proceeding with now is we do need to get the program running and moving, and then even through that process, it's going to help us identify staffing structures, kind of just work out some of the kinks and get the program moving, so even as these other planning efforts mature and we realize, and versus for the need as well as the staffing and the resources available, will determine overall what that 24/7 model looks like.
More data driven than
exactly.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I think this will be great with regard to data as we track how this goes. Obviously, you guys are anticipating there's a need here, probably going to be a greater need. Again, we go back to COVID, just like with the kids, and there's just an additional, there's going to be an increased need here of services. And it'll be great with the data as we track this and see how many we actually keep out of the hospital's emergency, departments and out of our clause, out there at clause. Those results, we use our results-based accountability as we see that working, and again, back to a return on our investment. I think we'll be able to see hopefully the ability and the rewards that we're generating from this money being spent from this grant, and then be able to again expand it as you guys want to beyond just our SO and but also police department, but to other agencies out there, other cities. So good. I think this is really going to be. It'll be interesting to see what the data shows and how we end up reducing these people hitting our emergency departments and our mental health facility out there in Claus. So, any questions from the public on this? Okay, seeing none, bring it back to the board, and we'll look for a motion.
Motion to approve.
We have a motion. And we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passed unanimously. Thank you guys very much. Thank you. Good job. Okay. That's it. We will move on to correspondence.
This board has received the correspondence and claims as noted on the agenda.
Acknowledge receipt of correspondence and refer as recommended on the agenda. Board of Supervisor reports. Any reports from anyone? Seeing none. Legislative, Fiscal, and Management Report, CEO Jody Hayes.
Yeah, just real quick. So in addition to many of the bills that were referenced earlier today, there's obviously a lot of legislative activity going on. In addition to that, we are tracking that the governor signed an executive order yesterday related to drought conditions in California. So we're taking a look at that, and we'll report back to you on any impacts here at the local level. But it does look like there are a couple things that will likely impact all communities across the state. So we'll be in touch on that. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Jody. Okay, before we go to adjournment, we're going to go into closed session. And our county counsel, Tom Bowes.
Yes, we have closed session this morning. We have a conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, pursuant to Government Code Section 54956.9, Subdivision D1. We have one case there. It's Maria Ruiz Perez et al. Versus Oakdale Irrigation District in the County of Stanislaus et al. And that's in the Stanislaus County Superior Court case number CV 19004901. Public comment?
Okay, and anybody like to comment on our closed session before we go into closed session? Seeing none, this meeting is adjourned.